Another school shooting in another American city. We'll talk with Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin, who believes it is past time for federal gun reform. And our roundtable on the Trump indictments, a tax cut in Lansing, and the UAW ready to rumble with the big three. Today is Sunday, April 2nd, 2023, and this is Flashpoint.
Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. Often this program hits a moment for which it is named, and certainly Thursday brought us to a flashpoint when we learned that for the first time in history, an American president is being charged with a crime. It felt to many that the Stormy Daniels saga had receded in the rearview window, but it roared back to life in front of a Manhattan grand jury. Even though many expected this morning was coming, it didn't lessen the extraordinary nature of the moment. Donald Trump's supporters were quick to declare it a political prosecution. Some even suggested it will actually only strengthen his support among his base as he plots a return course to the White House. But truth be told, this is just one of the legal worries facing the former president. We'll talk about the fallout ahead this morning. We're also going to talk about the new president of the United Auto Workers Union, who set the stage for upcoming contract talks in no uncertain terms, referring to the big three automakers as the enemy. But we're going to begin today with Michigan Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin. She appeared in Washington standing side by side with survivors of both the Oxford high school shooting and the shooting at Michigan State to introduce a series of federal gun law proposals. She was working on these well before the events of last Monday when 6 more people, 3 children, 3 adults, were killed in a school shooting in Nashville. The Gun Violence Archive tells us that while we've only arrived at April, there have been about 130 mass shootings in America in 2023. But can we legislate our way to a safer nation, or does the problem run much deeper than that? It's all today on Flashpoint. All right, a very busy week from Washington to New York to, sadly, Nashville. And doing something about school shootings has been very much on the mind of Michigan's 7th District Congresswoman, Democrat Alyssa Slotkin, who's my first guest this morning. Congresswoman, good to have you back on the program. We'll get to the gun legislation you're proposing in a minute. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you for your reaction first to this indictment situation. Historically, extremely important. It could end up being extremely important personally for Donald Trump. I'm wondering what it really means or does for sort of our cultural and political divide in America. Does it move the needles?
I think we have to wait to see what actually happens with it. I mean, obviously it's historic just to have a former president indicted, but we have a legal system. No one is above it, and that legal system has to bear out in order for us to know someone's truth or innocence or guilt. So I have no special knowledge on the case. I'm going to let it play out. It's going to be done in front of America, so there'll be judge and jury, and we'll see.
Campaign finance law is a tricky thing that trips up people all the time.
Yeah. Charlie
LaDuff pointed out in a column this past week, the difference here is that somebody went after Donald Trump. Nobody went after Gretchen Whitmer for her private jet flight to Florida way back when, and the trouble that she had in accounting for that. Is it selective prosecution?
I think that when you're a public figure, you open yourself up to extra scrutiny, and people are looking from all sides what you're doing, and that's part of the job. So Donald Trump was our president. People are going to look at what he did, and for me, that's just part and parcel of being a person in public.
Let's move to the legislation that you were proposing this past week. You appeared in Washington with survivors from both Oxford and Michigan State. Yeah. You've spent an awful lot of time thinking, obviously, about school shootings, but I think a lot of people wonder whether we can possibly try to legislate our way out of this horrible American problem.
Yeah. Look, I think we have to try, right? I mean, we have to decide as a country if we care about the #1 killer of children under 21. That's the decision at the table. We can debate about which law makes the most sense, but let's decide we're going to do something about it, like we did in the 80s when car accidents were the #1 killer of children. There was no car seats. There was no seat belts. We made a decision as a society to study it, to understand it, and to go after it, both in law, but also in our culture. And that's what I think we need to be doing right now. And I think frankly, Oxford, but then the Michigan State shooting here in Michigan, I can feel the change on the ground, right? 50,000 students, 100,000 parents, hundreds of thousands of family members, and all the alumni who have all been at that union, who all felt terrorized by watching that manhunt, that horrible series of events. the number of calls I got from Republican elected leaders, sportsmen, hunters, people who are very serious about their Second Amendment rights, as they have the right to be, but who also said, please protect my children in their schools, in their sanctuary. So I can feel the ground shifting. That's why we're seeing, I think, things moving forward in Lansing, and why I'm not going to stop at the national level.
I have a hard time, for instance, let's start with the Michigan State shoot. I have a hard time finding the law that would have tidied all of that up and taken and made that not happen.
Yeah.
If we had a red flag law, even his father didn't believe that the shooter was at that point in his life. I mean, it is hard to find. This is a very, very complex matter.
It is, but so are car accidents. And it's not like children don't still die in car accidents. It's horrible. It still happens, but it's not the #1 killer of children. And so it's not to say we're going to end all gun violence and there's one law that's going to be the magic bullet. That's not the real world. The real world is making a commitment to do something about it. And I introduced a piece of legislation last week specifically tailored to the very instance of the Michigan State shooter, right? He had been convicted of a gun crime, earlier, pled it down to a misdemeanor. When it went down to a misdemeanor, that meant the minute he's done with probation, he can go and legally buy a gun. That's what he did. He went to Dick's Sporting Goods, legally bought a gun. Right. The law I put forward last week says no, even a misdemeanor. The minute you're done with serving your sentence, you still have a 3-year ban on buying a weapon. That would have taken us into the zone of the Michigan State shooting. So it's not that any one law is going to do it. It's just, are we going to decide that it's a real problem and we're going to do something about it, or are we going to pretend it's not a problem?
Of course, the freedom to drive without a seatbelt is not enshrined in the Constitution, and it didn't take very long at all for Republicans in Washington to push back.
Yep.
And you are trying to operate in a U.S. House of Representatives that is controlled by the Republican Party.
Yeah.
What do you feel like your chances really are?
Well, it's interesting. We had this press conference to announce these bills. We had a survivor of the Oxford shooting. We had a survivor of the MSU shooting. We had a bunch of other survivors behind us. And they asked the same question. And then I had to go and vote. And I walked directly there to the House of Representatives floor, and a Republican came up to me very quietly, pulled me aside, and he said, I'm interested in your bills. Can we have a quiet conversation about your bills? There are still some moderate, reasonable Republicans who understand that the ground is changing on this issue, and they don't want to be caught on the wrong side. And I appreciate that. That takes bravery, and we should reward that bravery.
It is telling that it has to be a quiet conversation, right?
You've got to start somewhere.
The other thing that's been put forward, Ed Markey, part of this too, was trying to get to a real study of why this happens. There's an old adage in Congress that if you don't want to solve a problem, then immediately set about creating a committee to look into why it happens. We understand why it's almost always a young, disaffected, disconnected male, an outcast. We do kind of understand how these things, there are some similarities that we do understand, and we should know how to solve those, right?
Yeah, but there is a legal prohibition from letting the CDC study gun violence. It was an amendment called the Dickie Amendment put forward by the NRA and others so that the CDC can't study it as a public health issue. So of all the leading causes of death and the top 30 reasons why people die in this country, it's the least studied. We do put more money in the CDC to studying sepsis than we do to gun violence. So it's not that a study is going to solve everything. But again, my peers in Congress will come up to me and say, Alyssa, this bill or that bill isn't going to solve the problem. Okay, so let's understand it a bit. Let's understand the root causes. Why are these profile of these young men always seem to be the same? What can we do to get in front of it? That to me is a worthy cause, and certainly as worthy as studying sepsis.
If we continue to focus on guns, that's where we seem to get at loggerheads between the two parties, though, right? I mean, are there other things that we're just not fully understanding and addressing? I always liken it to the drug problem. If we dry up the drug supply tomorrow, we do not do away with the drug problem.
No.
We still have a bunch of people who need drugs. The real problem here is we have a bunch of people who want to kill a lot of people at one time.
Yep. So look, we all know that it's guns plus mental illness, right? Mental health issues of some kind. Lots of other countries around the world have a real problem like we do with mental health issues. You look at the UK or you look at any European country, but it's the combination with guns that turns it into deadly, deadly things for our children. And no other country in the world has the problem with school shootings that we have. So it's a combination of the two. But again, I'm open to any ideas. I'm open to thoughtful, creative ideas that have nothing to do with guns, that have to do with mental health. But let's come to the table. Let's negotiate like adults to protect children.
It is so sadly, uniquely an American problem.
It is.
We see some mass shootings elsewhere, but nothing like what we have here, 130 so far this year. Lastly, I just wanted to make sure that we hit on how big is the debt ceiling debate problem that we are heading toward, which we've done this many times. This one suddenly feels more acute.
Yeah, I think it is more acute. We're heading towards the debt ceiling. Probably this summer we would go into default, and that's a really big deal, right? Our credit rating gets lowered, and what that means for everybody watching, for the average American, is interest rates go up. So people are already complaining about interest rates on, when you're going to go get a house or a car, they would go up. So, and it's tragic for our credit rating, the strongest country in the world, to have our credit rating lowered. So what we need is responsible adults to put forward what they want to do on the budget. The president put forward his budget on March 9th. My Republican colleagues will not come to the table and say what they want to cut.
Not publicly yet, anyway.
Not publicly. Yes. So I'd love to see that. That's how we can have a real conversation.
Congresswoman Slotkin, always good to have you on the program.
Thanks
really
for
appreciate you being here. We'll bring in the roundtable right after this. This is Flashpoint on Local 4.
At Kroger, we want our fresh produce to meet your expectations, which is why we do up to a 27-point inspection to check for things like color and scarring. Because when it comes to fresh, higher standards mean fresher produce. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Get the lowest price on Michigan's largest selection of Beauty Rest mattresses at Gardner White. Get the sustainable Tides King or Queen, just $9.99. Plus, get our unbeatable 0% financing up to 88 months. Like Beauty Rest Black as low as $1 a day. Plus, free same-day delivery, free mattress removal, free box springs. That's an additional savings of $500 over the competition. And get free gifts. Save more at Gardner White.
Whoa, DraftKings. Look at all these blackjack games. You got Spanish 21, Vacation Blackjack, Touchdown Blackjack. What is this? Some big old Vegas buffet where you're putting the waffles next to the crab legs, deciding what dessert you want for breakfast? Well, guess what? Smack me in the mouth with all of it. I want it all.
New players can download the DraftKings Casino app and get a deposit match up to $100 in casino credit. Action's so good, why play anywhere else?
Somebody bring me the cream puffs.
When your door is always open, so is the fridge. At Kroger, however you shop, in-store, pickup, or delivery, you get the same great prices, deals, and rewards. That's a win-win-win. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Times are tough enough already, so when a viewer connected with me at one of my Help Me Hank meetups, telling me she paid a guy $1,000 to remove this tree and then he never showed up, I knew I had to track him down. You took the money and you guys never did the work. Can't do this to people. I promised her I'd get results. Now you'll see what happens. Why don't you go over there today and make this right with her?
Help Me Hank Tree Rescue, Monday at 5:45 p.m. on Local 4 News and streaming on Local 4 Plus.
Welcome back. Let's bring in this morning's roundtable. We will run out of time long before we run out of ground to cover, that's for sure. Happy to have with me former Michigan State Senator, now the head of the Michigan Veterans Affairs Agency, Adam Ollier, assistant editorial page editor at the Detroit News, Caitlin Buss, CEO of Focus Hope, Portia Roberson, back with us, as is the former Speaker of the Michigan House, Tom Leonard. Gang, thanks very much for being here. Tom, let me start with you. I don't want to spend a ton of time on the Donald Trump indictments. It's been already parsed to death here a little bit. Does it move the needle? It clearly is consequential from a historic matter, as I said to Congresswoman Slotkin. Does it move the needle in America?
Well, politically, I think in the primary, this is certainly going to help him. It's going to do nothing but energize his base. And, I tell you, right now, I believe this prosecutor, there's so much more we're going to learn and know once this is unsealed. This indictment is unsealed. But, this prosecutor right now, I think he has a perception problem. I mean, his key witness is a disbarred, 9-time convicted felon that has a personal vendetta against Trump. Most experts are saying he's had to stretch these charges to include a campaign finance violation that the Justice Department itself passed on. So he's got some issues here, I believe, with what's going to go forward.
If it's going to help Donald Trump politically, Portia, then is this what you wanted to happen?
Right. I would prefer that it didn't help him politically, but, you know, his fans are his fans, and they've been rabidly in his corner since day one. I don't think it's going to move the needle in terms of getting people to look and give him a second look in terms of maybe moving away from him. I do think that this DA has been very careful in terms of trying to make sure he has the strongest case possible. I think he knows from his own political standpoint, and listen, that's a consideration for any elected official, that if he goes out and charges him with something that can't be proven, that it's going to be pretty bad for him, right? And let's be honest, unlike in Michigan and unlike in Wayne County, they used a grand jury in this case. So it wasn't as if he alone was making this decision to prosecute. These were people who are New Yorkers who listened to the evidence that was presented before them, and they made the decision to indict Donald Trump.
Caitlin, the Michigan Republican Party is already in its current state of, I think it's charitably, you would say, in disarray. What does this do in Michigan, do you think?
I think this furthers, the schism. I think this is actually teetering on, being dangerous for our national fabric and for our body politic, and we've seen that happening in the Michigan Republican Party. This will certainly entrench some of those positions that have been there and flame some of those passions. Like they've said, I don't think it'll ultimately change anyone's opinion, but it's just more fuel for the fire.
Yeah, Adam, I talked to a lot of Democrats who really wish that the Republican Party had its act together better because of that it's healthier.
I mean, I don't wish that they had their act together better, but I think this is who that they've been for a long time. And you see that when we start a conversation and say someone getting indicted is good for their political future, I think that's a bad statement. And I think you compare that to what Democrats have been doing, talking about making it easier to pay for child care and health care and all those other benefits. That's what we should be talking about.
One of the things that I wanted to make sure we talked about today, it feels to me we'll change subjects and change gears here and move to the labor situation in Michigan. Adam, we just became the first state in 60 years to roll back right to work. And right about that time, the UAW elects a new president who refers to the big three as the enemy. At a time when we are fighting like mad to try and attract new business, new plants, new innovation, it feels like we have hit a really interesting place now in the old bugaboo of labor relations in Michigan.
Well, if you think about it, the big three have always been the strongest when the labor movement has been the strongest. And that's what you saw at the turn of the century when the UAW was founded. It's what you saw in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s as the big three were the preeminent producers of automobiles. And the better and the more that they start to organize, and that's what this UAW is talking about, is organizing those plants in Tennessee and in the South and making sure that Michigan becomes much more competitive because they won't be able to go to non-union plants in the South. They're going to do that business here in Michigan.
That's a positive way of looking at this, Caitlin. I think other people would say that, it's like finding a pile of horse manure and saying, this is great, there's a pony somewhere.
Yeah, it's a crazy approach to take them on like that. I mean, there is no economic analysis that bears out that, overturning right to work is going to be good for Michigan economically. I just don't see that coming in the future. And to the extent where the UAW...
But does it really hurt? I mean,
I think it does. You're up against competition with Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio, other places that are economically already beating Michigan, and they've maintained right to work. Now we're going to be level with Illinois, some of those worker situations. And the UAW has to work with the big three. The big three aren't leaving Michigan, so they're going to have to work through this power imbalance, even with their new leadership. But there's no good future for Michigan in overturning right to work, and many people have said that.
Interesting, Tom. I've said before on the program, I believe that the treasure or the damage of right to work is often overstated, but I think what maybe isn't overstated is the rest of the world watching us fight over it.
Well, I agree with Caitlin. I mean, symbolically, right to work means Michigan is open for business. And repealing that did nothing but hurt our state, in my opinion. There were several that testified that said that there are many companies around the globe that they will not look at a state that is not a right to work state. So I believe this is going to hurt us going forward. There are companies that are now going to pass on Michigan because of what happened 2 weeks ago.
Portia, what are your thoughts?
I mean, first of all, I think the first thing we need to consider is the protection of the worker. And so that's what unions do. They protect workers. And when we talk about being a right-to-work state, what people tend to forget is that those that did not join the union still got all the protections of the union, which they liked and they wanted, right? They just didn't want to have to pay the dues to the union to have it. And so I think, aside from talking about corporations who may want to come into Michigan, who obviously want people to not be unionized, which I'm not sure is a great thing and something we should be touting and asking people to come here if they are against workers being unionized, the reality of it is we want people to be protected in their workplace. You know, again, I've talked about this before as an African-American who's the child of African-American parents who came here from the South because this was a place where they could go to work in the Big Three. And they knew that there were opportunities here, but we also knew that being a part of the union was a protection for blacks in the union, blacks that were working at the Big Three. And so to get rid of that and to say that, you know, those companies will choose not to come here because they don't want certain folks to be protected by the union is abominable to me, that we wouldn't want those companies to be here.
Oh, go ahead.
I think it's interesting because the union, you know, it used to have such a better reputation maybe in the past few decades on terms of corruption and fraud. And so now those members are frustrated with their own union. And so there's some tension there. And I think that's part of what's changed and given the new leadership. But they don't necessarily have that trust maybe at this point.
And I certainly understand where there would be maybe perhaps a lack of trust because of some of the things that have happened at the leadership level. But ultimately, the
interesting if the UAW would be leading this, given where they've been over the last 3 years.
Exactly. But I think even in this recent election, what we've seen is there is some concern about why we made this change to a new leader, because they felt like that there wasn't necessarily, I think it's a lot of result of it being the first time that there's one person, one vote, and they wanted to see that change effect in terms of electing a new president. But ultimately, when you get back to the protection of workers across the board in any of these industries, that's what unions do. And I think that's the thing we should be touting, is that you come to Michigan, you bring your company here, the unions are going to work hard to protect the workers that work for you.
Adam, back when Governor Snyder and the group that led to bring right to work in, Michigan was often right at the bottom. In fact, if you counted the territories, 53rd, 54th on some economic measurements, and that we've gradually ticked our way up. Did right to work have nothing to do with that?
I don't think so. I mean, when you talk about the companies that have come, not a single one of them is saying, oh, I would have not come had right to work not been here. But what they are talking about are the difficulty in hiring talent and finding the right people. And as Portia said, people want to work in a space that treats them well. As we talk about what Michigan has done over the last couple months, it's saying that we're going to value people in unions. There's no difference in wage based on religion, on age, based on gender, sexual orientation. You see all of those markers in the private sector. Unions play the role to protect people. That's what we should be doing. And in a time where people are the #1 asset of any state, Michigan has better people, and we have better people because people have come here and said, hey, if I go to work, there's somebody that's going to protect me. If I go to work, I'm going to have a real opportunity to live and grow and build a middle-class life. And that has always been the foundation of the auto industry. It's why Henry Ford built cars and said, hey, everybody's got to make enough to buy a car. And you look at right now, most people don't make enough to buy a new car, to buy a house and do those kind of things. And that's what the new jobs of the future are supposed to be promising.
Yeah. I want to make sure we also had time to talk about the fight over it's an interesting fight going on in Lansing right now, Tom, over this tax cut that by law, Michiganders are going to get an income tax cut. The governor did everything she could to not let that happen, trying to find her own way forward on a different kind of tax cut. Now that it's happening, she seems to be wanting to take a victory lap on it. But Dana Nessel this week said that tax cut will only be in place for 1 year. I'm having a hard time finding any legislators who read the writing the same, or the law the same way. What's your take?
Well, she certainly jumped through a bunch of hoops to get there. I was there when it was written, helped advocate for it, and this was supposed to be a permanent tax cut.
And so I was going to say, because intent is now a big part of this, right? And your intent was that it was permanent.
Correct, but I will tell you, I tell you who should be most upset about this right now is House Democrats. Because when this income tax ticks back up 2%, or 0.2% next year in the middle of an election year, they are the ones that are going to get hit with a $700 million tax increase in campaign season. They are the ones that are going to be held responsible for this and accountable for this during an election year. Not Dana Nessel, not Governor Whitmer. It's going to be House Democrats. I would be quite upset if I was them right now.
I haven't heard any House Democrats upset about it yet, Kate.
No, I don't think so. But I think Michigan, people will be upset. There's still $7.6 billion sitting in Lansing. And, it's a very creative interpretation of the law to say that it's only for 1 year.
Well, if you're a millionaire or billionaire, you're going to get thousands of dollars back. But if you are a single mom who makes $24,000, that $17 is going to be a lot less than you would have got from the governor who wanted to give you $180.
Yeah, I think, listen, we have to look at also the fact that this was tied to an increase in revenue for the state, and that is not a permanent thing. I wish it were. I wish it was something that we could count on that was going to happen for the rest of our lives, but if it decreases again, we got to increase
Back
the
to
state
intent.
tax.
We didn't maybe foresee one-time revenues.
I would just say if they don't want it, there's a way to fix it, and that is through the legislative,
through the process,
through the House, through the
It's
Senate,
always-
through the process, not through the Attorney General.
We covered a lot of ground, but not all of it, I'm afraid. We've got to take a quick break. Back with more in just a minute.